And let's hear from the leader of the offense, Tua Tagovailoa, on how the Dolphins can keep that loss last night from snowballing into a problem that could maybe jeopardize their hold on the AFC East.
I don't think this is the same Dolphins team that everyone thinks about. We got a lot of really good players. We got really good coaches, and it's one loss. It's home this year. It's not like the world ends because we lost this game. We're human. We'll continue to get better from this. This is the NFL. No one's perfect, so that's that.
And what else are you going to say? Well, we're just done. We lost to a team we had no business losing to. We're at home. We got 3 out of our final 4 games at home, or 4 out of our final 5 games at home. I think it was 4 out of the final 5. Yes, and we're well. That's it. We just the chariot's turned into a pumpkin. It's over. It's done. And one thing that has turned into a pumpkin is Tua Tagovailoa's MVP candidacy. I think that's over and done now. If there's any MVP candidate coming out of that team, it's Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's value was proven. Remember back in 2011 when you were in grade school and Peyton Manning missed the whole year because of his neck, the 4 neck surgeries, lost season for the Indianapolis Colts. The NFL had a very short-lived, or more properly, short-lived magazine, official NFL magazine, that really did not last more than 6 issues. But
I don't remember that
they
at
made a
all.
big deal in one of the issues to make Peyton Manning the NFL MVP for 2011, even though he didn't play in a single game. And the theory was his value was proven in his absence. Well, I mean, it was a ridiculous take. But last night, as we're trying to figure out who the MVP of the NFL is this year, and there's anyone who thinks it's Tua over Tyreek if you're picking somebody from the Dolphins, you remove Tyreek Hill from the equation with that ankle injury he suffered on what looked like a hip drop tackle, but was actually a horse collar tackle. Clearly a horse collar tackle when you look at it. You take Tyreek Hill out. He missed an extended stretch. It looked like he wasn't going to come back into the game. He did, and when he was back, he made a long catch, and he seemed to be running fine. I think he's just working on adrenaline at that point. Adrenaline and stubbornness and his overwhelming focus and desire to get to 2,000 receiving yards. He doesn't want that derailed by an injury that may cause him to miss next week's game. He exploded down the field for this one inside the 10 that he caught in the second half, but he really didn't do much, and he was out of the game on key drives. So, we don't know if he's going to miss more time beyond this, but just last night alone, Myles, you take him out of the mix, and the Dolphins offense is a very different operation. It proves his value to the team, which in turn proves his value to the league under that kind of amorphous whatever MVP means. It's him over Tua.
I would agree with that. And, even though he finished with 4 catches, 61 yards, you do see what removing him from that offense does take away from Tua Tagovailoa's approach. And also Mike McDaniel's approach kind of as the game plan. And obviously you don't plan for guys to get hurt, but that that's a possibility. All right. But when you don't have Tyreek Hill on the field, it does make a huge difference because it means that there's one fewer guy that you have to account for when it comes to speed and explosion. And, oh my God, he can take any catch and take it all the way down the field for a touchdown. So, of course, that is going to change the dynamism of any offense, but especially that of Mike McDaniel. So, yeah, I think there is certainly some merit to saying, okay, Tyreek Hill and his value to that offense is in some ways way greater than the value that Tua Tagovailoa brings. And frankly, Tua Tagovailoa just did not have a good night generally. I mean, I think there are issues that came up again, right? The fumbled snap early on in that game. That's something that happened, I believe, here in Los Angeles back in week 1 when they were playing the Chargers. And it's kind of like, wait a minute, what are you doing here? You can't just drop a snap toward the end zone. And that's what he did. And so it came up again. You have that critical fumble that takes points off the board, and then Tyreek Hill gets hurt, and then the passing game, suffers from that dramatically. And frankly, I think the run game does too, because it's another guy that you don't have to account for when they're doing all this crazy motion stuff that Mike McDaniel has schemed up so well. So, yeah, look, I think that Dolphins offense, as long as it has Tyreek Hill, right, is going to still be explosive. But the minute you remove him, and it becomes Jalen Waddle and everybody else. And I don't mean this in a bad way to Jalen Waddle, because I think he's also a great player. But you take away one great guy, it certainly does make a huge difference. Much like how if you take Deebo Samuel away, as Deebo Samuel was gone for 3 games for San Francisco, that makes that team an entirely different offense. So those are the kinds of things that can sometimes happen.
Let's hear from Tyreek Hill regarding what happened with the ankle and how it came to be that he re-entered the game in the second half.
It was a lot of pain, man. It sucked. Like when it actually happened, I've actually been dealing with some ankle injuries this whole season, and when it happened, like my first reaction was like, man, my ankle gone. Then my adrenaline kicked in. I ran off the field. And then I sat for a while and got stiff. I was just going through a lot of pain, man. So then I just made up in my mind. I came in at halftime. I texted my wife. I was like, bro, like, this shit hurt. Like, get an ankle massage tonight. She was like, you better get your ass back in that game, dog. I was like, all right. So I just made up my mind that it's going to hurt. It's going to suck tomorrow morning, tonight and tomorrow morning. And I just went back in the game.
Not quite the same level of inspiration as when Adrian comes out of the coma and says, I want you to do one thing for me, win. Boom. But still, the wife gives the directive and Tyreek is back in the game. Now, a little problem with this. And they're going to call us narcs for this, but we don't. I mean, look, the rule's the rule. They're either going to enforce it or they're not. They're not listening to us. We're just trying to make people understand what may be coming for Tyreek Hill, because it's my understanding, based upon an executive with one of the other teams, that if you're injured, you are allowed to call a family member, provided it's in the presence of whoever has been designated, whether it's team doctor, director of security, etc., but no allowance of text messaging. So ordinarily, you can't use your phone at halftime. You can call a family member if you're injured, if the doctor's there or the other designated person is there. But you can't just grab your phone and start texting. You can't. That's just one of the clear rules, and people have been fined for that in the past. It's not a huge fine, but it is something that is frowned upon. They want no communication with the outside world during these games. So that's a little bit of a red flag, and we'll see exactly what the rule is and whether it was complied with in Tyreek Hill's case. If it's a fine, it's not going to be much. 5-10 grand, something like that. To quote the great Randy Moss, what's 10 grand to me? So it's not a big deal for Tyreek Hill if he gets fined. The real question I see is this, Myles. How's he going to feel today? Mm-hmm. Like, he mustered everything he possibly could to come back and play through that pain yesterday. And it still wasn't enough for him to play on a regular basis in the second half of the game. It's going to be important to see what the injury report says this week, because he could miss some time with that injury.
Oh, he could. And, that's the thing about ankles. You kind of don't realize just how bad it is in the moment, and you can kind of go off of the adrenaline. But like you said, once you wake up the next morning, sometimes that thing is swollen and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I played on this last night. Then things are going to get a little bit different. And also, it's a short week, so there's one fewer day to recover. Now, we saw Trevor Lawrence go out on the field after suffering the high ankle sprain last Monday night. Plays against the Browns was not necessarily as effective as he would probably have liked to be, but the Browns defense can do that to a lot of different people. It's a little bit different too when you're talking about a receiver and how explosive that guy's got to be, especially when you're talking about a receiver of Tyreek Hill's caliber and his speed and his explosiveness, all of the things that make him such a great player. So, I mean, this could be an issue when you're playing a defense like that of the Jets. And the Jets have new life now, right? Zach Wilson came out and played like a house of fire. So maybe they've got a new belief in that effort mentality, and they can come in and they can show the Dolphins what's what. So this is going to be something that definitely has to be monitored over the course of the week. I would be surprised if he practiced on Wednesday, but Thursday, Friday are really the days where it's going to be, okay, we will see if he's going to be out there, what kind of effectiveness he has. Is he limited, and is he going to be questionable going into this game in week 15?
There's that unspoken, everybody always says the right things. They always hug each other and shake hands, but there's still a rivalry of sorts between Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes. Who's going to do better without the other, right? It's the player and player version of the I know. Well, I know. That's all the more reason for Tyreek Hill to do what Patrick Mahomes did en route to the Super Bowl. Here's where I'm going with that. Mahomes sprains his ankle, and he comes back and plays in the game. And he doesn't miss a beat, and they win the Super Bowl. The difference, though, is even though Patrick Mahomes is very mobile and relies upon the ability to move laterally, vertically, wherever he needs to go, that's not the bread and butter of what he does. The arm is the bread and butter of what he does. For Tyreek Hill, it's the legs and the explosion. And you see the way he gets off the line of scrimmage. In that little, he squats down like a catcher, and then he fires away into motion and then turns it upfield, and he's shot out of a cannon. Think of the stress that puts on every joint from the hips to the ankles. And if the ankle is injured, it makes it harder to do it. And he willed his way through it last night, but it clearly caused him pain and distress, or he would have been back. Because, look, at the end of the day, his wife told him to go play, not just a few plays. He was supposed to play. And game's in crunch time, and he isn't playing. So, he must be hurt versus injured, pain versus incapacity. Yeah. I think that thing is going to be bothering him all week. It may be bothering him for the rest of the season. Who knows? But the quest for 2,000 yards, he had 4 for 61 last night. I assume he's still on pace to get to 2,000 because he's on pace for almost 2,100 going into the game. But it's now gone from sure thing to, I don't know. We'll see if he misses time with this ankle. We'll see how much, and we'll see if the Dolphins kind of indulged him last night. They don't have a problem with the player. I think most teams would have shut the guy down. You don't get a vote here. You're not capable of playing. We've examined the ankle. He willed his way back into the game, kind of the same way Patrick Mahomes did. At some point, the Dolphins owe it to themselves and to him to say, we'd rather you not play for a game or 2 or 3 and have you ready for the postseason, instead of aggravating, re-injuring, not letting this properly heal. We need you when we're chasing a championship, not when you're chasing 2,000 yards.
Well, and the other thing, Mike, you could tell that he was really injured. You were alluding to this, the fact that he was playing select plays and not every play. And I think that really affected that 4-minute drill that the Miami Dolphins were trying to run. That's one thing where it's like, okay, if Tyreek Hill's not on the field, it's pretty clear that the Dolphins are going to try to run it here, and they were not as aggressive as they usually are. You're only up by 6 points. You need to get this first down. You need to be able to try to close this game out. And they weren't able to do it in large part because it was pretty clear what the strategy was and where the focus had to be defensively once Tyreek Hill wasn't on the field. And I kind of thought that, it was 4th and 3, 4th and 4, that the Dolphins might go for it in that situation, try to end the game on offense, because Mike McDaniel has been that aggressive in certain spots before, but he didn't do it last night. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I thought that some of that definitely had to do with the fact that Tyreek Hill was not his normal 100% self. That's not to say that he wasn't giving his all when he was on the field. Obviously he was, but when those kinds of things happen, and you have to deal with those kinds of injuries, that not only changes things from a statistical standpoint, right, where he ends up just with 4 and 61, it's also, hey, what is our strategy on offense and how can we best utilize our personnel? Well, our best player's not on the field. So that really does make a difference when you're trying to close a game out and you're trying to win it. How do you win it? Well, if we don't have our guy at his best, man, it changes things a lot. And so, yeah, I guess you rely on your defense instead, and the defense didn't come through, and so that's one of these things now the Dolphins are going to have to deal with going forward.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.